Welcome. I'm Michael Corbett, and today we're going to go over the Ford Explorer Firestone case. So what is this case anyway? In the late 1980s to the early 2000s, Ford Explorers fitted with Firestone ATX, ATX2, and Wilderness tires were susceptible to fatal rollover crashes due to tire blowouts and tread separation. Both companies refused to take blame for the incidents, and because of this, they didn't make any major changes, which led to hundreds of people losing their lives and even more to be injured. So what was the need for the Explorer in the first place? Well, Ford needed a vehicle that would replace the Bronco II so that it could directly compete with Chevy's S10 Blazer and the Jeep Cherokee, which were selling very well. Ford engineers opted to use the Ranger frame to save time and money, thinking that a complete redesign or an all-new design of a vehicle would be too costly and too time-consuming. The results of this time and money-saving venture ended with a vehicle that was very narrow, had a high center of gravity, and a left rear bias of weight distribution. It also resulted in a low payload rating, one that was easily reached with just filling up every seat in the cabin. Firestone tires. So Firestone worked directly with Ford engineers to create an all-new tire specifically for the Ford Explorer. The goal of this tire was to have a passenger tire that looked like an off-road tire. So due to the Ford Explorer sharing the Ranger frame, the vehicle was very top-heavy, and Ford engineers decided that the easiest fix would simply be dropping the tire pressure to 26 psi. Firestone already claimed that this was going to be unsafe, but we'll get into that later. So due to this low tire pressure, one problem that Ford had with the Explorer was poor fuel mileage. Apart from poor fuel mileage, the Explorer was found to be 53% more likely to roll over due to equipment failure than other compact SUVs. Ford tried to fix this by having Firestone and Goodyear create lighter tires to combat the fuel mileage issue. This didn't, however, directly affect any kind of rollover issues due to blowouts or tread separation. Ultimately, Goodyear decided that it was too expensive to manufacture their tires and that it wouldn't meet their quality goals. So beginning in the early 2000s, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, started an investigation that later turned into an engineering analysis of the Firestone, AX, AX2, and Wilderness tires. Upon these investigations, Ford ended up having claims against Firestone saying that there were lower accident rates when equipped with Goodyear tires, which was true, and that the tire design and manufacturing process had many issues as far as Firestone. Firestone rebutted with claims saying that they had already recommended that the inflation pressure was too low and that the Explorer was more dangerous than any other SUV on the road. So why is the inflation pressure constantly coming up? Well, with lower inflation pressures on tires, you end up getting more heat and more rolling resistance. As radial tires heat up, there is a greater risk of tread separating from the rest of the tire. And this is because the radial cords don't mend well with rubber, and as heat goes up, the delamination process between those two goes up as well. So what did Ford engineers do to fix this issue with their Explorer? Well, one thing they decided was that they were going to use larger tires that could be aired to proper pressures. They decided to go with a more passenger car style rear suspension, a coilover suspension, as opposed to the leaf spring suspension that they were using in the Gen 1 and Gen 2. They also made some changes to the frame, but with all these changes, they ended up getting a lower, more balanced center of gravity. What this means is that there was no more left-rear bias of weight. With a lower center of gravity, the vehicle was harder to tip over in turns, or in the event of an equipment failure like a blowout. They also widened the track width, so they made the tires sit 2.5 inches further apart than they did in the previous generations. This again attributes to more stability and a vehicle that's harder to tip over. They also added inside the door jamb stickers with the maximum payload rating. As discussed earlier, payload ratings get reached very quickly just by putting people in the cab. So these two sources are what I primarily got my information from. Risky Decision, a special report study of Ford Explorer's design, reveals a series of compromises. We found that out already. And Radials, Rollovers, and Responsibility, an examination of the Ford Firestone case. Both of these sources have great material in them, and they go into this case in a much more in-depth process than I could in a 7-minute video. So please take a look at them.